almost any any relationship between things you can represent as a graph, right? And so whether that's social networks or COVID transmission or even things like for protein folding, you even care about graph structures. So there are lots of these, there are lots of problems there, and then other things that we are looking into are that, or at least that one can consider, are machine learning applications, cryptographic applications, and there's a whole bunch of these kind of things. But actually, one of the reasons why we decided to start selling devices early on is for a very simple reason, which is that we wanted to unleash the creativity of the community onto these, onto this as a problem. And another thing that I should say here is that we as QuiX are not restricting ourselves to these devices, right? So this is kind of historically what we have been doing, and it's something that we are very good at, right? So we are, building the best quantum photonic processors out there. We are also building up towards universal quantum computation using photonics, which is also a thing that is possible. So you can map linear optics to like the familiar gate-based model of quantum computation, and essentially the price that you pay for this is overhead, right? So what is really nice about these kind of low-level about these experiments that, for example, have happened at USDC, is that every single photon is kind of a computational unit, if you want, in the system, right? So every photon is directly, adding to the complexity of the problem. And so that also makes it very implementable, because you don't, you need quote unquote only 100 photons in order to get to a quantum advantage, which is, turns out to be, if you work hard enough on that problem, that actually turns out to be a solvable problem.
Yeah, I mean, you're not that far off, right?
No, exactly right.
Yeah, you're
and so,
20.
Yes, so we are, okay, this is maybe another thing to say, is that what we care about particularly as QuiX is we care about the programmability of this optical transformation, right? So if I compare, right, so the larger systems that are out there, they have a static or a more or less static optical transformation. And so in that case, or, the opportunity to vary some phases, but not the opportunity to directly tune not the opportunity to completely control the transmission matrix of your optical system, which is ultimately what let's say encodes the computation that you are
doing. So yeah, I was going to ask you then, with this kind of machine, and you sell it in multiple forms, right? You can get sort of like the core processor and then a complete setup with everything you would need to get it running, light sources, etc. How would people interact with this at the current stage it's in? So you have, I guess, 6 customers already. How do they then interact? Is there some kind of like stack that still has to be created for them to manipulate, like to program, etc.? What does that look like? Like actually interacting?
So I would say that the stack is quite mature. So we don't just sell the processor as a chip, but we sell it as a very high TRL device. So the processor comes packaged in a control box that has all the electronics in it, temperature control and so on, and also comes with a computer program that knows about all of the calibrations on chip. And so you as a user, right, you provide the photon sources, and if we're just talking about the processor, you provide the photon sources and the detectors. And it's a computer that has a program running on it where you type in the optical transformation that you want to do, you press enter and the system does it for you. So it knows about all the calibrations, it knows about how to interact with all of the various subcomponents on the chip. It does all of that for you. So in that sense, it's a very plug and play system.
Okay, and then are you able to, like, so a lot of listeners are probably used to the concept of, either annealing or gates, one or the other, gate-based or annealing. So what does it look like to program this? Like how can these transformations be mapped to some kind of problem? Does it have like any kind of set language or gate system that it applies already?
So
like a primitive one?
We're not yet at the level where we have this system in the cloud with some kind of interface where you can talk to it directly remotely. This, if we had something like that, that would of course make these, then you can immediately point to it and say, okay, this is the thing, this is how it works. But this is something that we are very much working on. So the goal is to have this in the cloud with all the peripherals in 2023, so next year. And then there will be a system where essentially you can say, just to make kind of a rough sketch of what such a system would look like. You can imagine that you, in a certain, you can provide something about the input state. So let's say you can say where there will be photons and where not. You can say what the optical transformation looks like, and then you simply get a certain number of shots of the experiment, right? So you press the button and our hardware starts running, records the outputs of this system, puts them in a text file and sends them to you, right? So that's what that would then look like.
Okay, yeah, similar, I guess, to other approaches. So next year we could imagine then this will be another photonic option available on the cloud. So customers who buy it now, do they then do they run some special program to talk to that other program that understands the calibrations and things like that? Is there like a local programming interface they use for the lab?
Well, I mean, ultimately, you'd have to ask our customers, I would say. But
okay.
As far as
so they're developing that.
No. But I mean, as far as they have told us, right? Because of course, if someone buys a device from us and they are not happy telling us what they're going to do with it, that's also fine with us ultimately, right? But
interesting. Okay.
Well, I mean, it's a commercial business, right? So and it's a finished product, right? So we trust our product well enough to send it out there and just have people work with it. But anyway, what I was going to say was, of course, we do have customers who do provide feedback. I mean, of course we do. But a lot of the customers that we have so far are people who are domain experts in quantum photonics, right? So they have some ideas about what they want to do with this thing, and they understand what is going on well enough to talk indeed via some other program, right? So we have some API where you can have your software running and it talks to our software, and you can integrate our processor into the workflow of your system, much as you would any piece of laboratory electronics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the dream, and that's the dream with the cloud too. Just integrating it in, like you would select another GPU or whatever. Now you want to select another QPU to do something extra.
Yes, yeah, exactly. That's ultimately the dream of the cloud. That's absolutely true.
And you hinted at some areas where this would already excel. So I wanted to ask you about if this machine is going to be one day the best at something, if you could predict. Like, for example, we know an annealer is always going to be probably the best at optimization. And then gate-based would be different use cases. So would you say there's a chance for, like, no matter what happens in the future, that this type of machine will just be the best at something?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, right? But I want to say in general that the question of where NISQ quantum computing is going is obviously something that a lot of people are busy with. And so, we are building these devices, but we are not just building these devices for the sake of building these devices. They're also a stepping stone towards universal quantum computation, and they are a demonstration of the strength of the underlying technology, right? So there's kind of various ways that you can look at this.
Okay. So you imagine the ability to continue scaling and adding Qmodes to one day have enough to be, like a universal gate-based computer like this, or do you imagine like changing the approach?
Yeah, that's not quite how it works. So if you want to go to universal quantum computation, you have to add additional capabilities. So it's not just enough to have passive linear interference on a chip. And this is something where we are, evaluating components, right? So we're looking at the moment, and this is something that I cannot say very much more about than this, but
Sure.
This is kind of where we are exploring the space.
Yeah, I was just that's what I was asking about, because I was trying to get a sense of what kind of plans for roadmap. Like, are you thinking along lines of making some kind of modifications? So just to think, like, if I were to ask you like 3 years from now, what would you expect to see? Would you expect to see something more along the lines of like universal gate-based existing?
Yeah, so the roadmap is to have the current non-universal system in the cloud by 2023, and then to have a universal system that maps onto gate-based by 2026.
Okay,
that's more or less
that's
what
I was trying to get at.
Like.
Yeah,
that's what the roadmap looks like. And then at the same time, keep building these non-universal systems and make them bigger, right? So by the end of this calendar year, we want to have out there a 50 Qmode system, and then let's say push that towards an actual demonstration of a quantum advantage using our own hardware. So that's sort of the plan in that direction.
And for that quantum advantage, would it be in the sense you described before, like it just proves that it's better at something, or would it be so it wouldn't be trying to worry about the critics and the whole, like, is this a usable application or something?
Well, it has to go. Of course it has to go to a useful application, right? But one also has to understand that these things go step by step, right? So, like right now, we are sitting on some of the most advanced photonic hardware in the world, right? And we want to build that out into useful applications, and having a quantum advantage in the sort of complexity sense of the word is a stepping stone towards that, right? And so while we are doing these things in the lab, we are at the same time talking to our partners on the software side to try to build out the software stack on that side, right? So we're not sitting still there either.
Okay. And do you anticipate, so where you're located right now, it's a region in the Netherlands, it's like considered a photonics ecosystem, right? There's a lot around you in that space. So are you constantly then looking to recruit in that area and bring in, fresh ideas? Just was wondering how that impacts the day to day, like being surrounded by all that.
Well, I would say that, in fact, being in this kind of hotspot of photonic technology development is really crucial for us. So something that we have going at the moment, for example, is a project, is an applied research project together with another company called QuiX, which makes essentially packaging for photonics, right? So they are very good at the questions of, okay, how do you get light on and off chip? How do you get electronic signals on and off chip? And as these systems get larger and larger, this is a question that becomes absolutely vital. Because at some point, it's not so much a question anymore of